My name's Monk Rowe for the Phileas Jazz Archive. I'm extremely pleased to have Doug Beach with me today. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Mark. Pleasure to be here.
I was going to introduce you and like what you do, but it will take too long.
Okay, that's fine.
So then I thought of saying, I bet you've done everything in the jazz world except being a roadie. And then I thought, with all the festivals, you've probably done that as well.
Oh yeah, that's part of the gig. When you lead a jazz program at a university, you're going to be moving some gear. My
Yeah,
my standard line to my students was always, "This stuff's not going to move itself." So that so yes, you are. That's part of the gig.
yeah. Was music when you were young, did it become apparent to you early on that that's where you were headed?
Yeah, I think it was pretty early on. When I went to a K through 8 grade school, which is a little unusual nowadays, but more standard back then. And there was a terrific uh, educator there that ran the band program, but he also taught general music to us, these things called tonettes, which were sort of like little recorders. And so I had that in my hand in third grade, and he would come in and teach us those. His name was Paul Talasco, and he really became one of my two important mentors in life. And this is the mid 1960s. So by the time I was in fifth, sixth grade, I was playing in a jazz band in school, which was a bit unusual at that period of time. For jazz ed was much younger then. Now, of course, middle school jazz bands are reasonably common. But rehearsal band where the pros were playing in a club, and we could get a great hamburger and listen to these guys play. So hearing this stuff and being around those musicians when you're in sixth, seventh grade, it was like taking a bath in the music. And how could you not get, sucked into it?
Yeah.
And I did.
I like that taking a bath in the music.
Yeah, right.
It sounds like I had a very similar experience, except we played what they called flutophones.
Yep,
And,
right.
I remember playing a tune for the whole school and how nervous I was. Did, did you can you recall when the idea of playing something that wasn't on the page came to you? How did it present itself, the idea of improvisation?
Yeah, well, in that band at Lindop School where I went in Broadview, which is a suburb of Chicago as well. Since Paul had us playing, some pretty nice pieces of music, there would be solos in there. I remember I had one on Satin Doll, and I was taking trumpet lessons from this gentleman, Lynn Blaisdell, who was a wonderful player in town, and later went out with Tommy Dorsey's band, was a lead player on that band and stuff. And so I said to him, Mr. Blaisdell, what do I do here? And he would show me a few notes, and he said, well, try this note, and then try to add some of your own things. And I wasn't ready to absorb music theory yet, I don't think so much. But he pointed me to the direction of experimenting, I guess you will, and trusting your ear a bit, which of course was, I think, a great lesson. And I probably still wasn't that good at the solo. I'm sure I wasn't, but I got into it. And then later, when I was in high school, I remember going to a summer jazz band camp, and Jamie Aebersold had just come out with his first play-alongs. And he put that first thing on with the D minor, whatever it was. I think it's D minor. And I just looked at this book, and he said, here's the scales you use. And I just look at this, just check this out, and it was, and it opened the kingdom to me in a lot of ways. So,
And those experiences then become things you pass on over the years to your students.
yeah, absolutely. So many of the things that I was exposed to growing up and coming up, when I finally ended up teaching at Elmhurst University and leading the jazz program, the great experiences, yes, I wanted to pass them on to these kids too. And that's why we did so many of these overseas tours. We did 30 of them over the years I was there. Played the major jazz festivals, Umbria, overseas, and Montreux and North Sea and many others too. is because I had that experience when I went to college. You know, we did a State Department tour, and boy, it just changed my life. So, yeah, you want to bring that to the next generation.
I imagine if you kept a scrapbook, it would be about 3 feet high.
Well, there's a bunch of pictures laying around, I'll tell you that. Some of which I'd be happy to show you, others I wouldn't show you probably. But yeah, great memories.
You have a memory of the first time you heard a particular jazz LP where you went, what is that person doing?
Yes, absolutely. Well, the teacher at that grade school I went to, he said, about sixth grade, he said, you got to start buying records. I said, okay. And he told me a few things to go buy. And, you know, I went to the local place where you get discount records. And the one thing I remember buying real early on was a Maynard Ferguson album. And it was called Color Him Wild. It was recorded in the 60s. And put that thing on, I said, holy cannoli, what's going on here? You know? And just yeah, Maynard is one thing. That's its whole thing too. But the band, I mean, just the energy and just how could you not get drawn into this and want it to become part of your life, you know? And then from there, it was, well, I just kept buying records. I had, you know, I was playing some gigs, so I was able to make a little money, and most of it went back into recordings, you know? So, and that was part of going to school, just sitting in a room like this and listen, you know, that's it.
Okay, so let's compare the first time you were paid for a gig. Do you remember how much you made?
Um, yeah, a few bucks. I had put this little band together, and my parents were having some people over, and they said, well, why don't you guys play for us? And we set up in the corner of the family room. We didn't have a big house. And I think there were three or four of us, and we stumbled through a couple of tunes, you know, and I think they gave us $5 each or something, which, you know, when you're in grade school back in the 60s, that's a boatload of money. That's at least one album with some change.
Yeah, that's
And then
about what
later,
I made. That's about what I made, yeah. So
yeah,
I have this, you know, I have this memory of what you're describing, saving up money, going to the record store and flipping through the LPs, and maybe someone told you about some person, and um, you you had enough money to buy it, but only maybe one or two. I remember that music became like precious to me
yes,
because you'd invested in it and you'd made this choice and you got home and you read the liner notes and then
oh, absolutely.
yeah. Do you think that today's students, because of the obviously different way they access music, I'm trying to phrase my question here. Do you think it's as precious to them as it was to us?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Like you said a minute ago, you've invested the dollars that you were able to accrue. You invested in that album to listen to it, and you know you own this now. And one thing that I think is a little sad with, I mean, CDs even worked away from it some, and now with everything just streaming, you can't always see who all the players were on these albums. A lot of times I'd go to a record store and I'd pull a record up and I'd see I wasn't really sure too much about this person, or maybe I'd heard of them, but I'm looking who's playing on it. Oh, Randy Brecker's on here, and whoever else, Steve Gadd is on here. This is probably a good album. And so that would a lot of times, because you could see that information right away, you were invested in the whole thing of who, not only who the leader was, but who all the players were. And I think we've lost some of that with all the streaming stuff where you don't see who's playing on there sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Can you pare down your philosophy about teaching improvisation? This is a large question. You and I grew up in an era, as you mentioned, where the Jamie Aebersold series was like a revelation. And now teaching improvisation is a big business, as is jazz in universities. But do you have a philosophy about teaching improvisation that you can share?
Yeah, there's a, kind of, to me, it depends a little bit who I'm dealing with. If I'm dealing with like I taught at Elmhurst in the college thing, and those kids had some facility on the horns, but and I do a fair amount of these things. I've done clinics. If I'm working with a young kid, one thing I learned from Clark Terry, I was around him a good bit in my life. And one thing I learned from him is he would say, okay, here's a blues scale, and you can use this over the blues. And that's fine. We know it works. And I might show that to a student, but then I'd say, okay, now you can just use two notes. You can just use the first two notes. If it's a B flat blues scale, B flat and D flat. And so then all of a sudden, that takes a lot of times they get themselves into trouble with too much information. We all do, but that takes some of that extra stuff out of it and maybe makes the window a little clearer for them to see. And so then they're forced to use rhythm, which we all think it's always got to be just the right notes, but rhythm, this music was rhythmic before it was melodic almost. And so they've got to use rhythm. And then they learn, okay, that B flat is here on my instrument, whatever they might be playing. And this D flat, and I played a B flat and a D flat, and it gets old from it. And then maybe they just understand, uh-oh, I can play the first note up an octave. And now that gives me really four notes. Sure, it's still B flat and D flat. And and then all of a sudden they start to say, oh, I don't sound so bad now. And that's okay. Go ahead, add the next note, add the E flat. And you add a little bit of information at a time. And that helps to me, that helps the young kids get started. Another great thing I'll do with those kids is we won't even talk about notes. I'll just say, I'll hopefully there would be a rhythm section or a recording, whether it be Jamie's stuff or whatever. I'll just take my horn and say, ba 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 doo da, and they go ba 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 doo da. I'll give them the first note, but then you're teaching them not only notes that fit, but you're also teaching them the rhythmic aspect and interpretation. Ba 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 doo da. How do those swung eighth notes work if in fact it's a swing tune? And so those are some things I'll use to get started with kids.
Yeah.
And I've had pretty good success with it. And then as they get older, of course, you go into other things. You start teaching about the harmony and scales that might work to it. But the other thing is, I don't care where level they're at, you got to listen. You have to listen. You have to copy, and it's an oral music, and we have to study it that way.
Yeah. There's a great joy in getting a junior high kid who may be that, like, they'll play one note, they're trying to improvise, they play one note and they go, oh, that's awful, and they stop. And then to get them to the point where they become more confident, that's a nice feeling.
Oh, it is. Absolutely. When we were emailing, setting this up, I mentioned I was in South Carolina, and I went down there to direct the South Carolina All-State middle school band. This first year they've had a middle school band at the All-State level. And I wrote a piece for them. And but I had all these kids. So what I do when I get into those All-States, one of the first charts we'll play will likely be a blues and get everybody comfortable. And I'll say, get to a solo section, I'll just say, okay, who wants to play? Man, that first rehearsal, I think there was one hand. But okay, take it, play. And he picked up a chorus. I said, good. And I clapped, and everybody in the room claps. Everybody says, oh, this is going to be okay. And the next time we played the chart, who wants to play? 4 or 5 hands went up. That's it. You got to draw them out. Of course, these kids don't know each other. It's an all-state band. Some of them know each other, I know. But, they're getting used to each other, and they don't want to screw up in front of their future friends, if that's what they are. But you take that fear out of it, I guess, and that's a big part of it too. And then pretty soon, by the time we did the concert, almost everybody in the band played a solo, that's what I want, even if it's short.
When did you get the impetus to start writing? You hear charts you like, maybe it's Maynard or Basie, and this idea that I'd like to do that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I wrote my first chart in high school. I was in a humanities class, college prep thing, and the final project was we had to do some project in one of the humanities. Well, of course, music was it for me. I appreciated all the others and loved them, but it was going to be music. So I just said, well, I'm going to try to write a chart. I had no idea what I was doing, zero, But I sat at the piano and plunked some chords. I'm a horrible piano player too, I'm just a ranger's piano. That's what I do. And but I said that, and I started singing this melody over it. Wrote the melody down. It was kind of a modal idea. And I started writing. I asked the trombone player, come over here and play some notes for me. Where is that on your horn? And I started asking questions. And so I wrote this chart. I'm not sure I'd want to hear it now, but we played it in the class. The jazz band at the high school came in and played it as big hit, and it worked, So you do that once, and that's a great feeling. And of course, you're encouraged. Then now I'm in the rabbit hole. I'm deep in the hole now, and then you just start writing. And I learned a lot. And after I got out of college, I wrote in college. I started the publishing company while I was still in college. But then I went on the road with some dance bands when I got out of school. And after I was in the band, I did about 3 different bands over a period of about 3 years. And as soon as I get in the band, I was there for a week. I go to the leader and said, you need any charts? Can I write something? And they all said yes. And the great thing for me was I would write it sometimes on the bus. I'd grab a piano before a gig or after, work things out, copy the parts on the bus, pass the parts out, and I'd hear it played that night. And I'd go, okay, pass it back. I got a few things to fix, But that learning of just hearing it played, priceless, just
Indeed. And Ellington, of course, had that at his disposal for his whole career.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So now we sit and use Finale and we hear it back, but it's not the same.
No, it's not. And I was fortunate when I was at college. I went to Millikan University in Decatur, where my other mentor, I was fortunate to have there. His name was Roger Schuler, a great educator. And but I was writing by then, and sometimes for the combo, I was in the jazz combo we had too. I would write for that. But if I wrote something for the band, he just said, "Bring it in. Even if you only got 8 bars, we'll play it."
Nice.
So I got to hear those 8. Maybe it was a sax solo, maybe it was a brass shout chorus. Just bring the 8 bars if you want. You don't have to have the whole chart. That was great too. Like you said, Ellington had it at his disposal. Well, Schuler let me have it too.
We mentioned Dave Ravello, who's of course at Eastman, and
Yes.
you say you know him. I'm going to ask you a question I asked him, and that was when I write the big band chart, I always get to this point where I've done the intro, and especially if it's an original composition, done the A and the B if there is one, et cetera. And you get to this point where, what am I going to do now? And the obvious thing is to hand it over to a soloist. But sometimes I don't want to do that yet. What do you do?
Well, that's exactly how writing is. You get the first part of it done, and who's going to play the A section? Maybe the 2 A's. You get to the bridge. Who you gonna hand it to? Well, it's always different, and it's always a question. You want some contrast from where you've been before, I think. So, but I tend not to that early in a chart give it to a soloist. I try to develop the chart a bit first, I think. I mean the arrangement, the parts. But it's always a challenge. And then especially since I write a lot of music for younger kids, I got to think about their chops and a little bit of rest. The Bones have been playing for a while. I better get them out of here. And that affects it too. So I might not always be able to do exactly what I want if I'm writing for that level. But it's always a challenge. But what I do in terms of, I got the chord changes, I got the tune, who's going to play what. Maybe I try to figure out an intro. The intro is going to be 8 bars. I'll just take a piece of blank, not score paper, just a piece of paper and write down, okay, intro, full ensemble, coming down, boom. And just write words down. Saxes on the A section, brass punches on the second time through, trombone section solely on the bridge, shout chorus on the final A if it's an AABA tune. Then maybe a soft shout will come after that, or maybe a sax solo, but I'll just sketch it out on paper so I can actually visualize it.
Yeah.
And once I get it all in my head, then I'll start to sketch a score page,
I
and
was
try to.
scrolling through your Doug Beach music offerings, and it's an incredible collection. Um, so I'm going to play a little name that tune with you.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. This uh this takes me back to college with transcription and sight singing. But I'm going to see if you can guess this tune. Let me just
Is that Seesaw?
yes, you got it. Thank you. You made me look good.
I had to think for a minute, but the title came from
Yeah.
okay, the little idea. Da, 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 da. I thought it's like a seesaw going back and forth, and
Okay.
that's where
That
the
was
title came
that was
from.
one of my questions. I sort of notated it here, and I was going to ask, like, you get a commission to write. I think that was a commission for actually a school near Rochester here.
Uh-huh.
Um, what do you do? You have a commission. I have to write something new. How do you get
Right.
started? You go for a walk? You like just let your mind.
That's interesting. I wrote a chart about a year ago for a school in New Jersey, and he wanted it to be a lab. I mean, I'll speak to the director if he writes to me or we speak, and I'd like to commission you to write a piece. First thing is thank you, because you're always flattered that someone wants to have you write something for them. I don't care how long you do this; it's always a great feeling. And then, what would you like? First, how difficult? I don't know what their band is. I don't want to write something that's too easy, that's going to bore them, or something that's out of reach. They're going to pay for this piece of music. It's theirs. And so you'll ask them difficulty, anybody you want to feature, who your strong players, any soloists you like, and then style. Do you want a certain style? So the school I wrote for in New Jersey about a year ago, right near Dennis de Blasio, right near his area, who I know kind of hooked us up. Um, I went for a walk one day and I started singing it. I got the melody in my head and I could hear the harmony. And I had most of the tune written by the time I got back from the walk, and I right away came up to the piano and wrote it down. Just a sketched melody and some ideas of where it was going to go, blah blah blah. And then you sit down and you develop it. I just finished one last week for a school out in California, and he wanted a ballad. So that's I think that's maybe about only the second time I've had someone commission a ballad. Usually that doesn't. But I knew and he had played some of my other tunes, and he gave me an idea of the ones that he really liked. So I tried to stay in that ballpark, and I asked him some questions, who you want to feature, etc. So, and then the next thing for me always, I really, really try to have something that's got some melodic content, some strong melody to it. I'm no Henry Mancini, but I really focus on the melody, and try to get a melody. And then obviously the chord changes come, and then how am I going to develop the chart from there? Where's it going to go? But one thing I learned from wonderful jazz educator at North Texas, Neil Slater, who led the 1 O'Clock Band down there for so many years. We published a lot of his music. But Neil and he's a great writer. I think he's a genius. But he had a thing, before you start your tune, your melody and your harmony need to be solid. Otherwise, it's like that's the foundation of everything you're going to arrange. Otherwise, a house is going to fall down. So I've always tried to live by that. I always thought that was a great lesson from Neil. When we spoke and he just laid that on me, and so that's kind of how I work.
Yeah, that's reinforces something I've always felt that when a when a composition is over, you should be able to hum something back that was
Listen,
in it. If it just leaves your mind immediately, then your melodic content probably needs some work.
yeah, I mean, you need something that's going to draw people in, and you can have, great scoring, how you've harmonized things and all that, but if there isn't some sort of melody there, to me, you're missing something.
Yeah.
Then you can go anywhere from that melody, but that's where we started. That's home base,
Yeah.
like improvising. We go off from the melody and improvise if we're playing, you know, don't get around much anymore, whatever it is. But we started with that melody. That's where Duke gave us a place to start.
You sound like Clark Terry.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
No, Clark,
he would say that. I
you
wonder
would.
if he pulled the same joke on you that he did on me. He came to Hamilton. I picked him up at the airport, and on the way back, he was going, "So how old are you anyway?" And I was 45 at the time, and I said I'm 45. He goes, "I got underwear that's older than that."
Right. Clark was, I mean, I had the good fortune to spend a lot of time with him. We gave him an honorary doctorate at Elmhurst, and he played with the band at the big honors convocation where they presented the doctorate, and all the faculty are there and stuff. And he did mumbles, and of course, just brought the house down. It was the faculty are all just standing. It was just, and he was at the festival multiple times, and
Mm-hmm.
I did a big interview with him for the Instrumentalist magazine, kind of a band director magazine, and just feel so fortunate to have had him as a friend.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
yeah. He when we a good story about Clark when we had him here for the doctorate. I asked the dean. I said, could I host a dinner for him and his wife Gwen that night? And they said absolutely, and just send us the bill. So we had a kind of a catered dinner at my house here, about 10 or 12 people. And I was at one end of the table, and we're all sitting there, and Clark comes in and sits down, and he stands up just before we're ready to eat. And he goes, "It's been a wonderful day for me, and I'm just so thrilled and honored. And I'd like to propose a toast to Mr. and Mrs. Beach." And he takes his wine glass and, "Oh, hang for the phone, but hang for the phone," goes into mumbles. And of course, just never forget it. Yeah, not to mention the fact that he was probably one of the greatest trumpet players that ever lived. I mean, man, that guy could play.
Very
He could play.
distinctive style.
Oh, in a minute, you know it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Before we move on from composing and arranging, um, I've adjudicated a bunch of festivals, and I don't know if I'm justified in this, but I always tend to focus on the rhythm section and the writing that sometimes I've seen is like overdone, especially for the drummer and sometimes for the piano player. I'm wondering if you have a philosophy about writing for especially the younger, the junior high. Like, what do you give the drummer and what do you give to the piano player?
Yeah, that's an excellent comment of yours. And two things. We'll take the drummer first. Invariably, you're exactly correct. There's so much stuff on the page. It looked like the page was black and they took out some of the white. It's just too much. The drummer looks at that. Anybody looks at that and go, what am I supposed to do with that? Where do I play first? So, if I'm writing for high school kids or certainly middle school kids, if there's a whatever the style is, swing or if it's a bossa nova or it's a Latin piece or something, I will try to at the beginning of the piece, right near the beginning, maybe where the melody is first stated, bar nine, I'll try to give them an example of the groove written out. A swing groove like the ride cymbal pattern, snare drum and bass drum at least. Give them that much. And if it's a Latin tune, I'll try to explain if it's a 2-3 clave or a 3-2 clave. But I'll try to give them at least a one or two, or if need be, a 4-bar example. After that, for the drummer, there's going to be mostly slashes with the rhythms that the brass or the saxes, if you need to catch them or be aware of them, up above on the top line. And the simpler, the better. Just give them what's important and let them keep their place. And that's kind of what I'll do. If there's a big hit, yes. If I want a specific figure, I will do the rhythm, bop, bop, boo, dot, dot. If that's what it is, I'll do the rhythm with the flags going up and down so that they know that's all you should really play. However you put it on the set, that's the figure you want there. And if it's a rest, there's a bar out for solo break. Obviously, you'll notate that as well. But then they're not going to see all that stuff, all that the groove stuff written again. I just give them the example at the beginning, and then the rest of it is the figures they need to know.
You said something really important, I think, and you're talking about if there's a brass hit or something, um, either they play it or they should be aware of it.
Right.
Which, yeah, I have a quote here I wanted to share with you from Bucky Pizzarelli,
Uh,
because he did Freddie Green as well as Freddie Green did.
Absolutely. He
But
could burn like burning rhythm guitar.
yeah,
Yeah.
and Bucky said, if you study the music of Count Basie, the rhythm section never played figures with the band. When the band played eighth quarter eighth, the rhythm section just kept chunking away through the whole thing. It works better that way. The minute everybody's doing the same thing, it doesn't work, like a drummer hitting figures with a brass section. It's terrible.
Well, and he's exactly right. If you listen to a lot of the Basie things, I mean, there will be a time when Sonny Payne would hit, or whatever, um, but a lot of times the rhythm section just grooving along, da 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 da, and then if it gets to a big spot, the drummer will maybe put a backbeat, like in All of Me, kind of just before that big hit at the end. So that's exactly right. And then there's the Buddy Rich kind of approach, where Buddy played so much with the brass. And it's different. Different music, I think, needs different touch, a different approach. And we played many times with the Elmhurst band with the great Dennis McCrell, who of course led the Basie band for a time and was in last drummer that Basie himself hired. And Dennis he'd be playing along and the groove was so strong, and he'd be with the brass, but at times he'd just leave them alone. But boy, when he went for something, then having not gone for everything, the impact was like terrific. It's like the best exclamation point you could possibly have.
Yeah. He gave me this memory of Joe Williams was helped get this whole project started, and we did a concert at Hamilton with Joe Williams and the Basie band with Grover Mitchell at the time. But
Right.
yeah, they did an instrumental set, and they they did All of Me, and I was standing in the wings, just chunking along,
Oh, yeah.
and then they suddenly pick up their horns and wham! I remember it scared the crap out of me.
Right. Exactly. And that's it. That band had that. They knew exactly how to do that, and that was I don't know, one of the greatest things about that band,
Yeah.
I think. All that, the dynamic thing too, of course.
So when you got home from the walk and you had this tune in your head and you sat down to start, did you start with on paper, pencil
Yeah,
and paper?
I still write with pencil, Monk. I'm not a finale person.
Well, does Dennis de Blasio shared a thing that you know the best pencil for composers?
The Blackwing, absolutely.
Well, what is the brand? I want to know.
Blackwing. Here's one right here. Blackwing Matte.
Oh yeah, no, I got a
Oh,
Ticonderoga.
that's a Ticonderoga. And here, hang on. You need. Here you go. They come in a box like this. I don't make any commission on these sales, by the way.
Okay, well, Dave
But yeah,
Ravello,
it's the best pencil on the market.
Dave Ravello swears that the King score pads are he will only write on them, and he bought out whatever was available.
Right. That was a great music paper company in New York. I remember going there when I was working at Roseland, and yeah, and King brand. That was famous.
Yeah,
But the Black Wings are just dark. The pencils are great. The lead doesn't break. You just got to have a pencil sharpener nearby at all times because they go down quick. But that's who, like Hemingway, all those great writers, Faulkner. That's the pencil they used when they were making notes.
so do you pass on your handwritten score to someone else?
Yeah, I have that luxury with the publishing company. I send it to them, and then they have an in-house copyist who puts it all in Finale. So the charts end up in Finale. It was interesting. I never did it. During COVID came along, which we all had a whole bunch of time in our hands. And I said, I bought a large screen computer, and I bought Finale, and I took lessons from a great music engraver in Chicago here, a good friend of mine. And I got to the point where I could put my own chart in. And then COVID ended, and we ended up, Doug Beach Music is distributed by Kendor Music, which is now owned by Excelsior Music in Florida. And so that once that became a reality, I said, well, I don't really have to do that now. And I love starting with a blank piece of paper and a pencil. To me, I just love that. And I know it's old fashioned and it's not the way it's done nowadays, but I figured Bill Holman did it till the end, and so did Pat Williams. Good enough for me. I'll take it to the end too.
I've had some
But I do,
funny,
yes,
I've
I
had
have that
funny
luxury.
experiences where um, I made a mistake while using Finale. Like I was writing a part and didn't realize that the score was either transposed or, in other words, I wrote something down that I didn't intend. And then I played it back and I said, wow, that's cool. And I felt like I was cheating, like it was a mistake.
But one thing I did learn too from teaching arranging at Elmhurst, the kids, of course, they all do Finale or Sibelius, whatever they do. And so they would have their projects that they would have to come in, and I would have people play their projects so they could hear them. Just like I said before, you got to hear it. And these kids would come in with these Finale parts, and they were a train wreck to read. And they didn't know anything about laying out parts on a page, how the bars should be laid out, and just the readability, if you will. So about the third year of going through this, I just said, wait a minute, your first project was just really for rhythm section, is going to be copied by hand. And you're all going to learn how to copy out a part. And it made a big difference to them. Then when they went back to Finale for the next project, they had a better sense of, oh yeah, I got to have this laid out. So we did do that. I'm not going to hold them back from using Finale, but I think the lesson of learning to do it by hand made a big difference in terms of them formatting things later.
Okay. Well, let's move on to your role as an impresario. I heard George Wein described as an impresario, and I think I can apply that to you as well with these the Elmhurst Festival, and I think it's a
Yeah,
great full circle that you played at the Elmhurst Festival as a student, and
I
then
did.
from where you went from there.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it happened. I mean, I even went there because I grew up around the area. I went to that festival at least a couple times when I was in high school just to listen, because it was music and these great college bands. And then when I in '73, the Millikan Band had done the tour overseas for the State Department. We had done a month's tour, Portugal, Spain, and Yugoslavia, and we came back, and the Elmhurst Festival had contacted Roger Schuler and said, would you bring the Millikan Band as a guest band and play on Friday night? Which is a pretty big honor looking back now that I know so much more about it now. And we did. We went and played that night. So I played that. That was the year Cannonball was there and everything too. So yeah, I played there as a student. And then actually when I came back in off the road, my grade school band director, the one I spoke about earlier, he was teaching at a high school by then nearby, but he was teaching at Elmhurst as an adjunct in the afternoons and leading the jazz band. And so they didn't have a full program there then. And he said, I need a trumpet player. Would you play? I said, yeah, of course. I'll love to play. So I did it a couple days a week and ended up playing in the festival there that year too. And then at the end of that year, Paul said to me, he says, I just can't do this anymore. He had a family and stuff. He said, would you want to take over the band? And I said, yeah, I'd love it. And that's how I got started there. And then, I don't know, 15 years or so later, the festival, I became director of the festival. So, and did it for a long time. So yeah, it's a long history.
I have a page here that Dennis sent to me, Dennis de Blasio, and it's got all your guests. And I yellowed a couple names, and the
Yeah,
first name I yellowed was Julian Cannonball Adderley because he's my musical hero.
yes.
What do you remember about his visit?
Well, that was the year I played there as a student at Millikan.
I
So
see.
I got to hear him play, but I didn't get to interact with him because I wasn't part of the scene at that point, other than just
Mhm.
playing with the Millikan band that year. But I mean, to hear Cannonball live was like, phew, holy cow! It was amazing. He just that fluidity, that sound, those ideas. Man, the records, it ain't a lie. It's all there, and to hear it live, we all know this. To hear anything live is
Yeah.
still the epitome of listening. It is.
I had an experience. I did a couple festivals at Hamilton. I had an experience that was a bit of an eye opener for me, and I wonder if it might have happened to you. I booked a very fine saxophonist, very well known in the business, not a household name, but I put him in a situation in a room with like 25 sax players, and I said, "Okay, go ahead." And he looked at me like, "What do you want me to do?" And I realized that I had made an assumption about people at that level, that all of them could relate to students or have something to share. And I wonder, did you learn that the hard way as I did?
Yes, very much so. I won't name a name. We had a jazz legend here. I mean, someone that we all know, and sent no music, because one of the things about the Elmhurst Festival is the guest artists perform with the Elmhurst band, and we back them up, and that's a great experience for the students too, to be around those guys or women. And so he came, no charts, refused to play with the band by the end of the weekend, wanted to put his own all-star band together of who he would play with, only play with these players. Well, yeah, how are you going to do that and have a rehearsal? I don't think so. And by the end of the weekend, I wasn't running the festival then. I was very involved, but Jim Cunningham was his name, who ran the festival then. He was the dean of students, actually. And he just looked at him. If this man's name was Smith, he said, Mr. Smith, and it is not a first name basis anymore. You will play with the Elmhurst band. And we never really did say goodbye at the end of it. I mean, could the person play? Of course, it's a jazz legend. But right then I said to Jim, I said, all right, we will hand pick the people from now on and know that they're both sensitive to what's going on educationally. It's a given they can play. They can all play, but they're going to be the kind of people that will work well with students, do a clinic, which is part of the festival, and do it well, and never had a problem afterwards. And you've got the list. You can see the names are on there. It's deep,
It's very deep.
and so we never had a problem after that. And that was quite a long time ago. So
Yeah. And
yes,
you want them to be, you want their demeanor and their behavior to be like a role model for
it
your
has to be.
students as
That
well.
it's an educational event first and foremost. Yeah, we have great concerts, huge crowds and stuff, but it's an educational event first and foremost. These collegiate groups are coming in there to play, get comments from these people, about how to be better, hear them play, get to maybe even interact with them a bit. Yeah, it's a role model. Exactly right.
Yeah. I've had some experiences with high school bands where they're just like incredible. And I
Yes.
almost don't know what to say.
Oh, oh, believe me, I know exactly what you mean. What's to fix? you know, but there's always something that
There's
you can
always
find.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can, and of course you take your hat off to them because you know how hard they've worked, and the director has worked their tail off too. And but there's all yeah, you can always find something, I think. And there's also a lot to be said for complimenting them. Maybe it's a certain player, soloist, the lead player, rhythm section player. You say something, you don't have to say anything that they need to improve. You say, you did that so exceptionally well, you know. And I remember when I was a kid in high school going to a festival, and I was a lead trumpet player at the time, I think. And, I had clammed a note, no question about it. When the lead player clams it, everybody knows it anyway. But the judge came up clinicians afterwards, and he made a point. He said, you really kind of fell down there for a second, but what I want to compliment on you is you got right back up and kept going after that. And that I never forgot that, and so there's that part of it too, compliment the kids.
So the lead trumpet player is supposed to talk to the drummer. Is that correct? I mean, not literally talk, but be connected.
They got to be in touch, I
Yeah.
think, and they have to agree. And I think that's a big part of making the ensemble work. I mean, well, it's a theory I still believe in. When I was teaching, if I had a good rhythm section, especially a good drummer, in the horn section, we had some neophytes in there. I could still have a pretty darn good band. But if the horn section was killing and the drummer was really struggling, I know we're just going to be okay that year. I mean, then you bring them along. So, but having that drummer is key, and having that lead trumpet player hooked up, those two guys like this, everybody else pretty much got to fall in line. They don't have much choice.
I've
But
always
yeah,
felt I've always felt bad when a band comes and for whatever reason they don't have a bass player.
uh-huh.
It's just sad. Yeah.
It is. And sometimes, especially with younger kids, they'll have a keyboard bass. And I'll always say to the director, I says, listen, at least you got a bass going on over there, and that's good. And yeah, it's not what we'd like to hear, of course, but I don't say it that way. And for the ones that don't have it, if the drummer's keeping them going, I'll make a big point out of that to him, make point of that to that person and say, listen, you're doing a great job over there. You're missing your left arm or right arm, whichever you want to call it. You don't have that, but you're still in there kicking the band along. So it's tough, but education, at least the director has got these kids playing, whether there's a bass player or not, they're at least playing. And I'm all about positivity at that point, myself.
Do you have advice for current jazz students who aspire to make a living in the music world?
Yeah, learn to do a lot of things is first of it. That was one thing for me. As I said before, I was playing, but I got into writing. So on those dance bands, when I was writing for them, I was making a little more money. So it was another skill. And then I also, because of that, I learned to do music copying with pen and paper like we used to do with ink. And so when I was backing off the road for a while, I did some copying for jingles. They needed parts copied. So it was another way to create income. But nowadays, when I was coming up, I think you were either going to be a player or you're going to be a teacher. Those were your choices if you're going to be in music. Now, the whole music business world is huge. I've got former students who are out doing all kinds of things. They're writing music for different things. I got one of my former students is a district manager for Yamaha. He covers the whole Southeast. So he's made a great career that way. And he's around music all the time, and instrument repair. I've got some of my former students who went one couple of guys, they got a piano technician business, the two of them, and they're doing gangbusters. And so there's all kinds of different ways to make a living at music besides just playing or being a teacher. And being a teacher isn't necessarily for everyone either. I mean, if you don't want to do it, don't get into it, because the last thing the world needs is a teacher who doesn't want to be there. You need people who want to be there to nurture the kids and bring them along. So there's lots of ways. Music has all kinds of avenues of ways to make money, I think. So
Thank you for that. That's very insightful. And I think that being a player helps with all those things. Like one of the best managers people talk about, Joe Williams' manager was John Levy, and he managed Cannonball and Nancy Wilson. And he was a former player. He played the bass, and he was with George
right.
Shearing and all these people. And to have a manager who was a musician And then
Yes,
you can fill in those blanks, to have an arranger who was a player, all that stuff, it's all interconnected.
it totally is. Yeah, and the manager who's a player understands what the musicians are going through to get to the gig and what the needs are at the gig, et cetera, for sure. And I mean, one of the great arrangers of all time, Billy Byers, he's a trombone player, but man, could he write? He could write for anything. But yet he had that understanding of what it is to sit in that band and what's going on around you. Probably had something to do with the greatness of his scoring, for sure.
Here's a question I used to ask a lot, and then I stopped, and I'll try it again.
All right, I'm game.
What's the worst gig you ever played?
Oh man. Uh,
This
uh,
is the answer I usually get. That's why I stopped asking. Most people like they put it out of their head.
yeah, I don't know. There's been plenty of gigs where you can't wait for the clock to strike midnight, if you will, to for the last note. But I'm sure there's one somewhere. I just don't have it because we used to do a lot of gigs with the Elmhurst band. That's how we made money to travel. We had a dance book and we'd play dances and stuff, and it was great because the band was playing. And so we probably yeah, we went through a time I think where there was one gig where we finished up and there was a guy there. He was totally loaded, and he came up to the front of the band, the saxes, and the singer was there, and he was giving him crap, and I just told him to kind of back off. Well, he looked like he was going to try to take a swing at somebody. And so I just said, okay, guys, packing up, we're gone. And we just kind of got out of there. But nothing happened. But maybe that's it. I don't know. But most of them, great times. Always, because the music is why you're doing it, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What have you noticed about this sort of goes back to that little chat we had about purchasing our own music. And do you notice students, because of everything available on the internet, from available music to teaching methods, while you were still doing it, what was the change in them? Did you see a change in your students because of technology?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, stuff was the accessibility. I mean, because YouTube and name it, just stuff online, just search. Man, the world is out there. You want to see videos of Basie's band playing, they're out there. You want to see videos of Ellington, they're out there. Anything, whoever it is, be Bill Evans, the pianist. You can see it. The time when I grew up, I got the chance to hear a lot of those people live. The big bands, Woody was still playing, Ellington was still traveling. I mean, Basie, I saw all those. But so the kids, the accessibility is huge for them, and I think in a lot of ways they'll learn. A lot of them have the opportunity to learn more quickly. I think there's transcribed solos you can see online. The notes go by while it's playing. All that stuff is great, and the kids. I have to say, a lot of my students, especially the last 10 years or so, as technology came along, they would come in my office. Hey, man, have you heard this? Check this out. And they would say, and that's great. And I hadn't heard it. And, we're all students all the time because there's always more to learn out there. And so I appreciated that a great deal, and of course, they would come in sometimes. You've heard this. Have you heard this big band chart? Could we maybe get a hold of it? No, I don't know it, but let me check it out and then do some searching. Maybe we would get it. And so that thing of accessibility and having so much stuff at your fingertips, yeah, that's a big change. I think, from like when, like I said, when I went in Jamie's class and that jazz camp that summer, that was one of those moments. It was way before the internet and all that, but that was like a huge thing. But now you can almost have that stuff all the time, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about you had a role in the Grammy Award for the Count Basie Orchestra.
Yeah, that's an interesting story. Um, we had at the festival one year the New York Voices, the singing group, in there, and they came in with a rhythm section, And I said to Darman Meter, the leader, I said, do you have any charts that we could do with the band? Because I like to have our kids, as I mentioned before, play with the guest artists. And he said, no, we don't have any. So I said to him, I said, well, how about if you send me your lead sheets of what you guys are all doing on a couple of tunes, 2, 3 tunes, and I'll make the charts up and we'll do them. So he said, great. And so I did Stolen Moments, the Oliver Nelson tune, and I did Cottontail. And so we did them at a concert, went great. And I made sure to stay out of their way. That's one thing I said, man, these guys are doing all their stuff there. We're just going to back them up. The charts worked. And they were leaving, and I just said to Darman, I said, here, man, here's copies of the charts. If you go somewhere else, you got some charts. A couple. He was grateful. Now they got a whole big band book. We played with them a couple more times after that. But they didn't have that then. It was before that. So I don't know, 5, 6 months later, I get this phone call from Darman, and he said, we're doing an album. We've been out with the Basie band. We're doing an album with them. We'd like to record your chart. Great, and my name on a Basie album? Are you kidding? And so they did it, and then that album was nominated for the Best Large Jazz Ensemble that year for the Grammys. And we were rehearsing for the Jazz Festival in February, and the Grammys were on, and my kids came down. It was a Sunday night for rehearsal. He said, I think that album you had your chart on just won a Grammy. I said, I didn't even know it was up for it. But it did. So actually, it was sort of a fluke. that's the whole story. But Darman still has it in the book. They still do it because we played it with them another time when they were here, and it was great. I was thrilled, and it got my name on a Basie album. That's it. So
Congratulations.
well, thanks. Yeah, it was good. So I got a certificate from Naris, contribution to a Grammy winning album, which is great resume fodder.
Right. Great resume fodder.
That's what it is. So yeah, that's how that one happened. And then later I did Nicholas Payton came here right when he first had the Gumbo Nouveau album out, and he didn't have any charts either. So I did a couple of his things, and he ended up using them later too. And so I just wanted the kids to play with these guys. That's all. I had no other, no other motive besides that. That was it.
Are you compelled to be arranging something?
You mean like all the time?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. If I get something in my head, even if it's just a melody, and I think it's worth it, I want to get it written down because I may forget it. And then I just keep a pile of tunes over here, a pile of melodies. And when I start to write, like for the publishing thing, the publishing thing is a bit cyclical. We put out new music every fall because that's the academic cycle. And so we just recorded all the new music in February. We have a recording session out in Denver where we record all the stuff. And so obviously getting ready for that's a big push. Doug Beach Music does 15 a year. Not all mine. I have some other great guys that write too. But and I just finished this commission for the school in California, the ballad. So now I got a whole bunch of melodies here, and I got to start thinking about next year. But do I feel like compelled? No, sometimes I'll leave it go for a month, 6 weeks, and not write. It's fine. You got to clear your head out at some point too.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you have another hobby to clear your head out?
Yeah, hang on a second. Let me get rid of this.
Yep.
Sorry.
It's all right.
Yeah, I do. I have a serious disease, Monk. I collect old Lionel trains, and it is a disease.
Is there medication for that? Let's see.
Not that I've found yet, no. But I love it, and I have a bunch of train guys I hang out with too, and now I'm kind of into building trains and all that too. So, but it's a great escape. When I was teaching, especially, you're immersed in it all the time. I could go down there and all that stuff would just go away. You just in that. So I enjoy it. So that's it. That's the main thing, I guess. Yeah.
So I'm going to pick just to sort of wrap up here.
Sure.
of this long list I have, I'm going to pick a couple of names and you can comment on them. And then you get to pick one or two. All right.
All right.
People who have been to your festival. I'm going to pick Bill Watrous.
Bill Watrous?
Yes.
Yeah. He was a gem. He came with Patrick Williams. When I put that concert together, my my idea, my concept was I always loved Pat's writing just from the time I was in school, and he was just a hero to me. And I wanted to have him here, so I got this idea put together. What if I brought Pat in to conduct my band? And I had a good band that year. And then I brought in a couple of his key soloists with him to be featured on his music. So Bill was one, Bill Watrous, and Tom Scott, and Warren Looning, the great session player from LA, and then Wayne Bergeron came and played lead trumpet. So it was star studded, needless to say. And Pat sent a whole bunch of charts that we had not done yet. So Watrous was there, and I had heard stories about him being he could be a problem. He was a prince. He was the best. He just, of course, he played his tail off. And I remember standing on the side of the stage. He's on there, and he's doing Pat's arrangement of "All the Way," which is real high on the trombone. Just, and he's killing it. And he turns to me when he's done. He's walking off. He goes, he's working. He's making it look easy, but he's working. But he was great. He was just wonderful to have here.
Yeah.
And of course,
he played on a CD I did. He played on it. And then we used to chat on the phone all the time. And I kept pinching myself because I'm having this long conversation with Bill Watrous. And it's just a blessing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about Maria Schneider?
Wonderful. Of course, brilliant, super nice person and easy to work with. And just she's a Midwest girl. She's from Minnesota. You'll probably know that. And when she was here the last time, she came in a night early. And so we have the clinic thing on Saturday morning. And so that's usually the guys who are the guest artists that year. But I got the idea. I said, we get those guys the morning off. What if I could get her to come and just sit on the stage and talk about her life and music? And so we have a big slide screen behind, a big video thing behind that is a slideshow of former people that have been there before. And she walks in, she's on the stage. Kids are in the audience already for the clinic. And she walks in, oh, this slideshow is great. Oh, there's John Fedchuk. That's my former husband. And she's just talking away, just down to earth, and gave an incredible lecture, if you want to call it that. Little piano, played things to demonstrate what she'd done. And then she says, can we just go get some eggs and potatoes and talk? And I said, sure. So we went and hung out, and she's just totally down to earth and just brilliant and marvelous, marvelous musician, of course.
Yeah, she said something I thought when I interviewed her, I thought was quite important, and that is that she had to have a life outside music. She said, I just want to live. I want to dance. I want to be outside because this affects the way I write. And I thought it was something that needed to be shared, that she said.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. You need a release from it because music is intense. It's high. You have to focus. It demands all of you when you're in it. And I know she's real into birding. That's one thing she does. She likes to go out and look at birds and stuff. So that's her release, I think. Or one of them. But that sounds like her exactly.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You have anybody you'd like to bring up and share an anecdote?
Well, one of the gems is Bobby Shu. I mean, he's been here multiple times and just brilliant player, brilliant educator, incredibly intelligent, a very, very close friend, and but just man, Bobby's always a gem to have around. Just he's not traveling anymore. A couple of it's almost 2 years ago now, or a year and a half ago, Denny de Blasio and I and Wayne Bergeron, we all met out in Albuquerque and just hung with Bobby for a weekend, and he told us stories, and it was, and we just hung out, and we flew in on Friday about noon and flew out Sunday about noon, but it was great, and so he's one that's near and dear to the festival, and of course some of those people that are on there um, were heroes to have there to me. Pat was one, as we just said, Pat Williams, Bill Holman. We had we had Willis with the band here 5 times, I think, and he wrote about 5 or 6 commissions for my band over the years. And he was just always. We gave him a doctorate as well, which is he's the only one he got, which I was shocked at. But Bill was the master of understatement, all the time. Like we we when we gave him the doctorate, the ceremony, which is held at commencement, we're sitting there, and at the end of it, you have to sing this thing called the alma mater, which is this moldy old hymn that's been around the school since for 200 years or whatever it is, and it's in E flat. And I'm sitting right next to Willis on the stage because I had presented him for the degree. And we got through the first verse, and he leans over and he goes, "Should be in C." All of a sudden, it's like, that's right, it's too high for everybody. You can hear him singing, but that's all he said, "Should be in C." And and that night, he said, he says, "It's Nancy and I," his wife was here with him. He said, "Nancy and I want to take you out for dinner." And I said, "Well, Willis, we're going out for dinner, but we're taking you out." And we went to a place and ate, and sitting there, and I make sure I grab the check right away so he would. And he looks at me, he goes, "I out fumbled you." Just those little lines.
Yeah. Oh God, there's no explaining. Actually, um, I don't know. I've tried to understand why most of these individuals just have this way about them, and part of it's a life of improvisation,
Yeah.
making your living. Like, what's next? What do I have to do here? But it comes out in their personalities and like those lines that you just said.
Oh, absolutely. And we just at the festival in February, Jeff Hamilton was here with his trio, the drummer, great drummer, and he played with Willis's band, and he said a lot of those guys, Bob Cooper and Marty Page and all those guys, had that same kind of dry. They all had that thing like Willis did. He said, "I can't imagine being around a crowd of them and just listening to them talk because it would be." And Jeff always has one of the great lines. He said, when he was in Willis's band, he said Willis looked over at him and they were getting ready to play a chart. And in his deadpan thing, he says to Jeff, he goes, "Make it hot." So make the chart hot. But it's not make it hot. It's
Make
make
it
it
hot.
hot.
Well,
So I don't know.
this whole
Jim.
project over my shoulder, you're seeing a picture of Joe Williams and this fellow named Milt Filius. And Milt Filius was a Hamilton graduate. And this whole project came about because Milt Filius was listening to Joe Williams and Milt Hinton chat
Uh-huh.
and do that. Remember this, remember that, talking about people is we have to interview these guys. And that's how this whole thing started because of that repartee they had.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. Yeah. It's great that you've done all of this, man, documenting this stuff for everybody. Terrific.
So I'll just close with returning to Dennis de Blasio, who I quoted in the beginning, and he was talking about you. Doug's a true friend, can belly laugh, is loved by generations of students, plays great trumpet, can arrange, makes things happen, has a guru-like people radar, and disliked by no one.
Well, I paid him well. Right.
Yes, indeed. You know what? That's resume fodder right there.
Yeah, well, Denny's very generous. I'm not sure I can live up to all that. But you
Well,
try to treat people well. You know, that's one thing we've all done, like at the festival. You try to treat people that you have in there as you would want to be treated if you were going somewhere. And so, and that pays dividends over the long haul, I think, you
yeah,
know, treat them well,
yeah.
for
Well,
sure.
you've had a marvelous and important career, and I'm sure it'll continue. And thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Mark. Such a pleasure and an honor to be here with you. I so much enjoyed my time. Yeah, it's really been fun. I hope we get to meet in person sometime.
I hope so too. All right, I'll
Great.
just pause here and we'll say our goodbyes.